Can I talk about a psyop for a second? I try not to talk about stuff like this anymore because I feel like when I was younger, I guess younger isn't the right term. When I was newer to streaming, one of my biggest priorities was like distinguishing myself from some trends that I saw on the online left that I thought were really harmful and bad. And I think the problem with that kind of engagement is, for one, a lot of the people who are posting the most annoying shit online from a left perspective, like the most psyopy, like, it's ableist to breathe out loud or whatever, that like sector of behavior is usually being propagated by, and I say this respectfully, literally the most pathetic people alive. So if you go after them, it kind of makes you a little bit of a bully. That being said, I've talked a lot about how life is going to get harder and we're all going to need to ourselves become a little bit more durable. And I've seen some sentiments on Twitter that I'm going to briefly elevate, probably to the great dislike of the people who posted it originally, because I feel like it's important to talk about a certain mentality and attitude about what direction we take for like going forward from here. I saw a post on this on, I think, YouTube. I put out a YouTube video recently where it was a segment from stream, and I was talking about how everyone's going to need to get a lot stronger in order to manage the hardships to come. And there was a YouTube comment, and it said something along the lines of like, hard times don't create strong men are what's left after hard times, or something like that. Which, of course, it's as anything that can be compressed within like 8 words, it's a simplification, but there is some truth to that, I think, where when things get really difficult, like, not to say that if you're strong you're guaranteed to survive, but there's definitely some kind of correlation there. There's definitely a correlation. So Darwinism, well, Darwinism, except rather than selecting for factors which increase your survival under regular circumstances, it's more like Darwinism in the sense of like, can you avoid making a noise while hiding in the attic? In this case, unfortunately, this is kind of a tough love thing. My I guess tolerance for some sentiments is going to go down with time, because how like, I've been doing this for years too. I'll talk about something like, it would be good for you to work out because physical fitness can do a bunch of good things for your body, and it can make you more confident, and it can reduce the likelihood of you falling ill or needing medical attention in the future. And all of this is useful and blah, blah, blah. All of this is going to need to get more important moving forward, okay? If the ACA gets revoked, you all know, like, first of all, if you have any pre-existing conditions, you're probably not getting health insurance. And if that being able to stay on your parents' health insurance until 26 in America, that's also an Obamacare thing before it was 18. Like, good luck getting health insurance as a 18-year-old, like, recently trans kid or whatever, right? Good luck with that. Like, there's a lot of stuff. There's in many respects, the world is going to get harder. And I don't think that means that life can't be good or fun or whatever. Like, there are like uncontacted tribes out in right now on the North Sentinelese Island, someone is straight up hitting the yoinky sploinky, and everyone else is laughing, even though they're all probably going to live to like 35 or something, okay? You can have a good life even if things are difficult. I'm not saying it's all doom and gloom. I'm just saying we're going to have to try a little bit harder. So with that in mind, can we and I'm begging you, and this isn't meant to like bully these people, but we need to stop with, okay, so this isn't like a call out post. I'm using this as an example to springboard off of, okay? But I saw both of these go negatively viral, like get polarized viral. You'll immediately understand why. I'm not even going to dedicate much time to like digging into these, but unpopular opinion. But I think the left needs to move away from using, quote, the working class, end quote. It positions disabled people who can't work as the enemies of workers. In a mass disabling event where more and more people are unable to work in the coming years, how can we conceptualize work and labor need a radical reimagining from a disability justice framework? This goes on for a really long time. Of course it does. And then from the disability enthusiast we have, y'all aren't going to like me, but reading is a privilege. You need free time, the education, the ability, access to books, etc. But we should be helping each other access books however we can and sharing info and stories in a number of mediums. This is in response to somebody saying that we should all try to read more. Organizers who want their community to be literate or want them to access certain info should first get to know what their community's access needs are, such and such and such. And here's a drawing of something related to Gaza, it seems, which is very sad and not relevant to the point that I was making. But, I don't need to like dig into what's wrong with these sentiments, right? Unfortunately, and this has been a problem with anti-ableist activism for a while, it seems like this is honestly the case with a lot of stuff, especially concerning mental illness. A lot of I'm trying to think of how to put this without coming across like a little mean. A lot of the sentiment around these types of organizers seems more concerned with making people complacent in weakness than helping people become strong and independent, if that makes sense. And you can read a bunch of uncharitable shit into what I just said if you want to, because you're like an asshole maybe, but like what I'm saying here is, I think, straightforwardly, understandably true, and I stick to that. Like if there was like a society of people, not society I should say, or like a support group for people who had recently gotten into a car accident and they all have like various injuries, the solution to their problem should be physical therapy, right? Like obviously there's a lot they have to do, but ideally everyone there should try to get physical therapy, because if you can't walk anymore, you want to be able to walk again, and if you can only kind of hobble, you want to be able to walk strongly, and so on and so forth. And sometimes I feel like in these online communities, especially with regards to like mental unwellness, like neuroatypicality, rather than people helping each other with physical therapy, instead they're like saying that the assumption that they should have to walk after a car accident is ableist, and trying to reassure each other that it's fine to permanently live with like hobbled walking because it would take effort to learn how to walk again normally. Does that make sense? This all sounds very psyopy. It does sound psyopy, but there are a lot of people online who don't have the best lives, and they're very compassionate, at least within their own communities. And for that reason, their compassion kind of overwhelms their good sense when it comes to stuff like the need for self-improvement, okay? I see stuff like this all the time with mental illness. There are anorexia community, like eating disorder communities, anorexia, bulimia, whatever, where rather than trying to fatten up a little bit and not be crazy about that shit, they like reassure each other that it's fine to always want to have every rib showing through your skin. Or there are communities of depressed people where they, rather than like encouraging each other to kind of like aggressively go outside and touch grass and like interact with people, they all kind of fall into a cycle of learned helplessness where they think it's okay to reaffirm their worst patterns of behavior with it's okay, it'll be better tomorrow. And that's not a bad thing to say, but if you're saying it every day to a person for whom it's not true, it isn't better tomorrow, past a point they do have to be kind of like launched out of a cannon at a patch of grass to touch. You get it, right? There are communities online that are like this. Both of these pertain mostly to like physical disability. I guess like illiteracy isn't a physical disability, but you know what I mean. It's not necessarily neuroatypicality. But we need to leave sentiments like this in the dustbin of history. This sentiment is created in a very privileged environment, okay? I promise you that the North Sentinelese are not forming, they're not like engraving into rocks, like rock Twitter threads. About how it's ableist to learn how to weave baskets or whatever, okay? Like, they're not doing this, all right? Only in very comfortable, privileged communities are people even given the opportunity to learn that kind of helplessness, because, let's be real, if things were really difficult, that helplessness would end their lives. I don't think that's a good thing. I just think that people should try to stay on their toes, even when life is comfortable enough that they could survive not. I saw this as well, and this tweet is like, the tweet here is making fun of it, not like showcasing it in an affirmative or positive sense. But I commented on this. I said, why is it that there are so many like tender queer organizing pamphlets that look like they were drawn for and by 5-year-olds? Does anyone else understand what, like, isn't that a little bit like infantilizing? Have you noticed that? Where there's this like, I don't know if it's Tumblr necessarily, but this looks like it's for a 5-year-old, but this is meant to be for adults. This would not motivate me to overthrow capitalism, I guess is what I'm saying. I know it's different strokes for different folks, but like, this is literally just like drawn for 5-year-olds. We're talking about political organizing here. We're not talking about like, how to do gardening, except I guess we are. Because one of the things here are some things that you can do as a community member to resist individualism and the destruction of community solidarity. So I want to talk for a second, if I may, because I think it fits in the same category, because it's also about learned helplessness, just in a different way. I think that this also needs to be relegated to the dustbin of history. And by this, I mean, what would they call it? Tourist activism? There's a better term for it than that. What is it? It's called like, it's when you're engaging no, not slacktivism necessarily, but or hobbyism. I think it's hobbyist, or hobbyist activism is what I'm thinking of, where you want to do things, but you also want to feel like you're being politically effective. So you delude yourself into thinking that what you're doing is radical activism, hobbyist activism, you know, radical reading clubs, make radical art, making radical zines together. Stop using the term radical, please. Radical theater, community gardening, hand out masks and COVID tests. I guess this was probably made a few years ago, I guess. So this is an example. I think this is also a kind of learned helplessness because, look, I'm going to be real with you guys, okay? There are a lot of people online who will tell you stupid shit like, you can overthrow capitalism by gardening or like growing your own tomatoes. No, you can't. Modern society demands that your food be grown in gigantic fields managed by experts. You know, like, I'm sorry, that's how it is, okay? There is no way around the mathematics and the thermodynamics of this. Everyone loves to grow their own food until it comes time for them to actually manage their own garden. Have you managed a garden? I love going outside one morning to see that, like, all my food is f***ed, and I don't know why, because it was some, like, obscure, arcane, like, cultivation strategy that you forgot to implement, and now you starve to death. That's great. Stop saying thermodynamics for no reason. I know I shouldn't, but it does make me happy, and that's what we call radical linguistic descriptivism, okay? It's okay to have the hobbies that you enjoy, all right? That's cool. That's thermodynamic, as they might say. It's radically thermodynamic. Enough. That's cool to have your hobbies, all right? But, like, there are a very small number of things that can actually meaningfully resist the status quo in any kind of, like, actual, what, like, you know Rent? You know Rent, the musical? Where it's the people with like, the gay people in New York with the AIDS, and they're, like, really annoying, and it's a bad musical, and they're really annoying, and they're acting like they're transformatively changing the status quo and destroying the system and so on, but in reality, they're just being, like, selfish young adults. I love it. Shut up. I'm not here to argue about it, but you understand what I mean, right? You can like Rent, but you understand what I'm talking about, right? No, I haven't seen it. That's probably for the best. I mean, I haven't. I've only seen the Lindsay Ellis video on it. Gay Hamilton? You mean Hamilton? Have you ever seen anyone do heterosexual shipping from Hamilton? Does anyone even give a fuck about Eliza? When was the last time you saw anyone drawing Alexander? And okay, anyway, the main thing that is actually capable of challenging the status quo is organized labor. That's it. A strike. That's it. That's the reason why everyone is terrified of strikes. Remember when the dock workers strike on the East Coast was brewing, and we looked over the Fox News business channel, and every rich motherfucker the entire East Coast was showing up to say, this is terrible, this is going to destroy the country, and then, like, they ended up settling the strike after 4 days or something, because the idea of a dock worker strike is petrifying, like, because you would instantly shut the whole country down, basically. Organized labor, strikes, that's what makes a difference. Unionizing, striking, collective action, these are the things that make a difference. You can do versions of this in other instances. For example, rent strikes. America, in some states at least, actually has relatively strong tenants' rights. Again, it depends on the state. Please look up your local laws. But there have been plenty of examples of successful rent strikes where, to protest unfair conditions, a bunch of people in an apartment block are like, yeah, we're withholding our rent until you change such and such, and you can get you can get stuff done there. I think that all three of these posts are representative of a certain mindset that is not only dangerous to the left in its political capacity, but is actively dangerous to your life. Like, I mean, your actual blood and soul life. I think that there's a reason why I and other people kind of we refer to these as psyops as a joke, because the idea, for those of you who don't know what a psyop is, like the idea being like, this is something that the Central Intelligence Agency would cook up in an effort to distract leftists, basically. It's like the equivalent of when you see accounts that were made on October 2023, and it's just like 100,000 posts a day by a black woman who says stuff like, you know, child, I ain't never had no Palestinian who voted for Black Lives Matter. Leave me out of it. And then, like, it's like that, like 1 million times a day. And it's like, okay, Central Intelligence Agency, I understand. I get it. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know what child means. I know there's not a single black person working in your agency, so it must have taken a little bit of, you know, work. I wonder how many of my taxpayer dollars went into this particular invocation of the word when describing how, like, people in Gaza have never supported Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or whatever. I don't know. It's that's why I call this, and why everyone, I guess, calls these psyops, okay? Because they are seemingly like purposefully harmful. But in this case, they're not actually psyops. They're being done by people with good intentions. But as is so often the case, the good intentions don't really mean squat in the real world. This stuff like this bothers me because, like, these people are going to be the first to go. You all know that, right? Like, there are people in chat right now who engage in leftist politics in a kind of hobbyist sense, but for the most part, you keep your nose to the ground and live your life in like a disciplined way. You can make it through anything. If you're not that loudly leftist, if you're like effective, hardworking, you get your education, you get your job, you can live to 93 as long as you know, don't eat too many carbs or like manage your cholesterol or whatever. Like you can make your way a long time. All right. But for people who make activism their lives, but then engage in kinds of activism that like basically deliberately hamstring themselves and others, you are not going to make it. And I am saying this with the greatest of sympathy to those people. And not that they're ever going to listen to me because I'm like a dirtbag leftist or toxic or literally Hitler or whatever. But this is me growing from how I was before, okay? Because before the goal would have been making fun of them, and now I just really want everyone, including them, to make it through this, and that means they need to be smarter about, I have no idea what your point is, but yes. Has my point been unclear? We need to be strong, and for those of us who have a harder time with that, we need to help each other, but we shouldn't try to help each other with types of activism that mostly serve to engender a kind of learned helplessness. Does that make sense? Your candy ass is soft, is what I'm saying. That's the main, your candy ass is soft. I'm in a small town, there's no activist groups here. That's fine. You don't need to join an activist group. I have always maintained that the most effective way to be an agent for political change is to just generally be a well put together person. Be strong and disciplined. I mean this in every sense, you know? I mean this like literally work. The more life hampers you, the less able you will be to do other things. If you are poor, you will be less able to find the time and resources to do what you want. So keep to your studies and get a good job if you can. I know it's not that simple. I'm not saying any of this is fair. I'm only saying that it's part of the path, you know? Be physically fit because you don't want to be hampered by sickness, tiredness, disease, illness, whatever. Be socially attained, you know, talk to people around you, be charismatic because your ability to interact with and win over the people around you could be vital if in the future there might be a situation where you can be helpful, you know? Maybe your usefulness in a political sense, your ability to beget like a good outcome, maybe that isn't you going out and joining an activist org. Maybe instead you live your life for like 12 years and you do your best and so on and so forth. You take care of your finances, you raise a family, but sometime in the future, 12 years from now, okay, you get approached by a covert union organizer in a country which has even worse union rights than we have today. You get approached by a union organizer and they say, are you on board? And if you're on board, would you be willing to spread the message? And you say yes. And because you're in that job, because you're a family man, because you're sociable and charismatic and well put together, you're able to convince other people. And maybe that's when you make a difference, you know? You don't need to rush off to it. And in all likelihood, if you just rush into the first social cause that will take you, you're probably not going to be that useful. Sometimes it's about biding your time, waiting for the right opportunity, and then in that critical moment, being the guy everyone can depend on, or girl, or non-binary person that everyone can depend on, and you do your work. Look, I'll only put it this way, relative, that's a very idealized view. Strongly disagree. I think I'm actually describing an extremely realistic understanding of how organizing and activism tends to work, okay? I'll put it this way, all right? If I may, okay? Like, relative to my life. It's pretty obvious what my skill set is. I like talking on stream. I lucked out. I got the job. Yay. Okay? But I've been a leftist for longer than I've been a streamer. What did I do with my time beforehand? Well, when I was in university, I did like organizing and volunteering work. I worked in prisons. I blah-de-blah-de-blah. It's not that interesting, okay? I enjoyed that work. But the only reason that I'm able to do this, where my influence is many times greater than what I did back then, is because I always cared about being able to speak publicly. Long before I streamed, I cared about public speaking. And I wasn't even that great at it when I started streaming, but I cultivated a skill skill set. And eventually, through blind luck and circumstance, I was able to use that skill set in a way that I now feel in a satisfactory way gives me some kind of sway over others to advance my political interest, which in this case, of course, is like and subscribe, ring the bell, donate. Thank you. Does that make sense? Maybe I could have just jumped into the first thing that I saw, but thankfully over time, like I was given an opportunity, I took advantage of it, but maybe there's another timeline out there where I thought like, okay, well, I just have to do what I can. And I end up like never growing as a person. I develop burnout. I'm not as effective. And I'm just like making my way through life. I got lucky, to be clear. But I also think that what happened to me is a good example of the importance of trying to develop a skill set, live your life well, and then as the opportunity comes, take advantage of it. Just don't learn helplessness. Don't let anyone online make you feel comfortable not engaging in self-improvement, right? It's okay to be comfortable with who you are, always, right? You should always be comfortable like with yourself as an entity, like as an individual. But you should also always be looking to self-improve and not be hostile to people who encourage self-improvement. Which jobs would you consider to be most positively impactful? Lurky, you're not listening to me. You're doing the exact opposite of what I just said. You're getting at something from the bottom up. You're talking about like, I just told you, live your life. Don't wait for direction. What leftist job should I have? Just you knowing what you want to do and being disciplined and attained and what have you, that's your growth process. If you can't do that, like that's the step one, you know? I'm going to be talking about this a lot more in the future, largely because I feel like a lot of people just struggle with it. I get so many emails that are to the effect of something like, you know, what leftist job should I take? And it's like, dude, I don't know. I don't know what your skill set is. Also, even if I knew what your skill set is, I'm not like a matchmaker. I don't know what you should be doing. If anyone who says that, I feel like you're kind of tripping at the first hurdle, because one of the most important things you can be is self-confident, and you must not be very if you're asking a live streamer for a job recommendation. Like you must have a pretty like poor grip on what direction your life is taking if that's a question you're asking, you know? Well, anyway, again, not trying to put down anyone. I just think it's important to focus your rhetoric appropriately.